Okay, so we need to understand how to write the literature review chapter, which is chapter number 2 of the thesis or of your research paper. Now, this is a guideline for the bachelor's level, but for the higher level, the things are a little more complicated. So, first of all, we need to understand the two portions in the literature review. The first portion is that what you know about your variables. For example, if you have a framework, which is something like this, now if there are three variables involved, you need to have a good idea about your variables. I call it the what part of the literature review. You're not going to give these headings as what part and how part, but this is just to make you understand that first of all, you need to tell the reader that what is the meaning of this variable? What is the meaning of this variable? And what is the meaning of this variable? And how the previous research has investigated and elaborated about these variables that are variables of your study. For example, if I am going to write about organizational commitment and let's say organizational performance and let's say uh, turnover intention, any of my variables, I need to tell the reader, and before that, I need to understand that what are these variables, what kind of research has already been conducted about these variables, and what do we understand about these variables till date. So I call it the what part. What are these variables? And currently, where do we stand in terms of understanding of these variables? For example, if one of my variables is organizational commitment, I am going to write about the organizational commitment as my first heading. So I'll give my heading organizational commitment and I will start writing about everything about organizational commitment. Then I will write about this my second variable, for example, turnover intention or whatever the variable is. And then I will write about the organizational performance or the employee performance, which is my third variable. So for each of your variable in your study, you will give a separate heading and you will discuss about each variable, starting from the definition of the variable, how do you define it, and then how do the previous research or different authors have defined the same variable. For example, if there are dimensions to this variables, you're going to discuss the dimensions. And then a little bit, you're going to talk about that what has been studied, what has been known about these variables. So when you are doing your literature review, you need to tell the reader that when you reviewed the literature, when you saw the literature, you got this much idea about one variable. The same way, second variable. The same way, the third variable. This will be your first part in which you're going to do the what part, that what are these variables and what are we going to, what is the definition and the explanation of each variable. So in the first part, you will be giving the definitions, the dimensions, and the explanation of each variable that you have studied or found in the previous literature. So this is going to be your first part. This is relatively easier than the second part. Now, what do we do in the second part? The second part, if I call it the how part, what part was the first part? I'm calling the second part as the how part. The how part means how this one variable is related to the other variable. Because if you recall, we discussed that hypothesis is an educated guess. Hypothesis is a theory that has already been tested by number of authors, and you are also going to test it. So in order to create a hypothesis, you need to give the previous literature citations and the explanation that how this variable is related to this variable, and this variable is related to this variable, and then how this variable is related to this variable. So the moment you are going to give a literature, previous literature related to this and this variable, any two variables, you are going to write a few lines, maybe one or two paragraphs, about how these two variables are related in the previous research, and then at the end you will be giving your hypothesis as an educated guess. And once you have done your what part, your how part, then you're going to give your theoretical framework, and then after that you can also give a list of hypotheses. But hypothesis will be generated in the second part, the how part, which we are just going to discuss in a while. So in order to understand the second part, let's just look at one of our papers. So if we look at this paper again, this is our abstract introduction. And if you're going to look at this literature part, it doesn't have the what part exactly, but it has the how part. So what it is saying is goal orientation and information exchange. How these two variables are related and how previous research has talked about these variables. Now, sharing of information has always been an effective way of building knowledge. This person has said it. And knowledge is the foundation of and the building block of creative ideas. So this is how these two are related. The information exchange among the members can be characterized as the consultation, questioning, seeking information and feedback, and discussing work-related problems to find solutions. And then we are talking. We are just giving the references that this study has also argued that team goal orientation is a strategy by which teams achieve goals within the organization which compel them to share information. So when after giving some references from here to here, at the end we are saying that based on the literature that we have just discussed, this is the hypothesis that we have generated. And this hypothesis is saying that team goal orientation is positively associated with information exchange. Then the second hypothesis, information exchange and creativity. We talk about their relationship, and then at the end, we are saying that information exchange among team members impacts team creativity, and also the third hypothesis. The same way with creativity and innovation, we have given some literature here, and then at the end, we are making the hypothesis. So after deriving your hypothesis from the literature, you give your theoretical framework. And this is your second chapter, and this is how you write your second chapter. The third chapter is going to be your research methodology, which is given after the second chapter.